I feel like a star is being born. This guy absolutely eviscerates an entire room full of British boomers.
You said you were 26. You haven't been out into the world that long. So
That's awfully presumptive.
I mean, what is happening in the UK is very strange.
26, right? I mean, in 26 years, I'm very curious as to the 3 or 4 issues that have really driven the way you think.
The subtext here, where are the adults in the room? What could have led you to such a flawed way of thinking?
That is something I think we as journalists and we as perhaps adults don't understand. Why do you think the way you do? The 3 or 4 issues that happened that have actually formulated your position.
I've seen an attack on objective truth. I saw people treating people differently based on the color of their skin. I've seen a breakdown in critical thinking. Well, that's 3 right there.
Immigration, lockdown, and climate change, I think.
They hand a microphone to one of the people in the audience, and this guy starts to challenge him.
Yes. Can you explain your theory of free speech to the late Alexei Navalny?
Pardon?
Can you explain your theory of free speech to the late Alexei Navalny?
For some reason, this guy's like, how dare you criticize freedom of speech in Britain when Russia is worse? I kid you not, that is essentially the logic here.
Okay, as in, why didn't J.D. Vance, who you referenced, why didn't he address that? Why didn't he address the fact that you could say everything you've said here tonight at the Valdai conference in Russia, and people like Alexei Navalny get murdered?
This is attacking the person's motivation, claiming you don't care about what's happening in Russia because you want to talk about free speech in the UK.
And can you reflect on the difference between British society and British free speech and what happens to people who dare to speak in Russia?
I can reflect on those 2 things.
Putin, not good with freedom of speech. Yes, bad. But what does that have to do with what is occurring in Britain? Why would you hold that against J.D. Vance? I'm not sure what the logic here is.
First of all, I would assume that Vance is using, and the Trump administration are using it as a strategic bargaining chip to stay stum to try and get Putin to the negotiating table. We're going to... Sorry.
That is a working assumption.
Wondering if they have a bargaining strategy with...
That's my assumption. Yeah. As far as free speech in Russia, yeah, it doesn't exist.
That does not negate from what is occurring in the UK.
But also the problem here is that we also have stringent speech laws that were applied where they shouldn't have. I mean, on
but
raw
we'd all be in jail for being
on raw
here
numbers, more people.
if we were in Russia.
Hang on.
Even the audience.
Why is there this insistence to not look at a problem that is occurring in your own country?
On raw numbers, more people are jailed for speech violations in the UK than they are in Russia. They are.
That's partly because people don't open
No,
their
that's just on the raw numbers. Now,
well, the
you
cost is death.
No.
Wait, we've got to get into this. Which numbers are you using?
What about people who've been murdered?
Yeah.
And it's just remarkable logic to claim that how dare you criticize what is happening in the UK around freedom of speech when Russia is worse.
I'm not disagreeing. I don't.
Yeah, but surely that's an idiotic response.
How is it an idiotic response?
Okay, let's just get the microphone to John.
You're assuming he's ignoring what's happening in Russia. He's even articulating what is happening in Russia and that it can happen.
Sorry, but what about the people who've been murdered?
Those things are bad. Of course, the Russians murdering their political opposition are terrible.
How many people have been murdered in Britain?
Peter Lynch.
Sorry?
Peter Lynch. Do you know that name? Peter Lynch. Does it mean anything?
No.
Okay.
Why does this frustrate the audience so much? Nothing he's saying seems controversial.
He shouted that the police called them traitors and held up a sign about the World Economic Forum. One of the conspiracy theorists you think is pretty wrong. He was sent to prison for 2 years, I believe it was, had a heart condition and hung himself in jail because he was afraid of being attacked.
That's not
So he wasn't
murder.
killed.
Because he was
murder.
And that's the response. That's not murder, though. Does that indicate a problem?
Because he was afraid of being attacked by fellow inmates who, Keir Starmer had labelled them all as far-right racists. So, he was put in the conditions that led him to take his own life. I think that is wrong.
If you dare criticize freedom of speech in the UK, that somehow means that you aren't critical of Russia. That somehow correlates to your position on Russia.
I also, of course, think that Russia is awful and I would not want to bloody live there.
Okay, so politically, though, what I'm talking about, for example, people I've met,
Yes.
and were critical of Vladimir Putin.
Yes.
Anna, I'm so angry, I forgot.
Notice he just said, I'm so angry, I forgot what I was going to say. Why are you so angry?
I'm so angry, I forgot.
Do you understand that I don't like Vladimir Putin? Do you understand that?
He even has to stop them and say, you understand, I don't like Russia. Russia bad. Russia bad. Let's talk about what's happening here.
No, but I don't understand, that you're applying your mind to the following. Anna Politkovskaya and Natasha Esmerova, two great journalists critical of Putin, in particular his war in Chechnya. Thirdly, Boris Nemtsov, and then Alexei Navalny.
Yeah.
In order, poisoned then shot,
Yes.
shot, poisoned, and poisoned again,
Yes.
dead.
All terrible.
So these are people who challenge Putin's political power,
Yes.
not like the pensioner you're talking about.
Yes.
These are people who've all been murdered. There are many, many more of them. And it seems to be absurd that you are highlighting weaknesses and bad spots in our record while completely ignoring the serial killing by the killer in the Kremlin.
Because the whole topic of this debate was around what is occurring in Western democracies. Russia's not a democracy. Why are we even talking about this?
Because the title is Democracy in Danger and Russia isn't a democracy. So the point being, how am I...
Okay.
I'm not going to be able to fix any of that. I'm pointing out that if you want to preserve a democracy in the UK, these are the inherent flaws in it and we need to address them.
Exactly. How could that possibly be upsetting to this audience? And yet it is, because then we get this.
Is there another country in the world, Connor, in which you would prefer to live? And if so, why don't you move there?
How dare you critique what is concerning to you about your own country? Why don't you just move away? It's
Let's well, I should let you respond to that, Connor, first of all, and then we'll get to the other questions.
Because one of my chiefest complaints is that the cultural and population churn has changed.
Answer the question.
I am. There's no need to be rude.
if we do not discuss these things, that's how things get out of hand. And we've seen that play out throughout history.
No.
country?
I am.
Name a
No.
country.
Hang on. I'm saying the reason I'm saying no. The reason.
Name a country.
No. You have to let him respond to. We're talking radical empathy.
Yeah. Thank you.
So if you have something you care about, it's all the more reason to point out the mistakes being made.
The reason I'm saying no is because even though I don't think things are being run very well in this country at the moment, I would miss my family. I would miss the roads that I know. I would.
Sir, may I ask you,
And this guy makes a very good point here.
if this was a gentleman of Pakistani origin who was complaining about some of the
Institutional
legal
racism.
institutional racism, would you be saying to him, sir, if you don't like it, you can bugger off elsewhere?
The other opposing side of the debate jumps in and even agrees with it because it's such a good logical point.
My question is because I
No,
think
you
it's
wouldn't.
a
No,
great
you
answer the question,
country,
sir.
and I think we should be proud of it, and you've spent the whole evening rubbishing it.
So now you've spent the whole evening rubbishing it by pointing out what's happening around freedom of speech where people are actually getting arrested.
And so it seems a perfectly fair question: is there some other country in the world
So people
think is preferable?
People who have criticism to this country, even if they were born here and they love the area, they love their family and that here, if they have criticisms of the way it's run, they should just up sticks and leave. Is that?
No, of course the criticisms of you spent the whole evening rubbishing the country. I'm rather surprised you want to live here.
Okay, we've dealt with that. Thank you.
This individual is not budging. He's very clear, concise, and articulate. He knows why he is there, and it's no contest at all. I mean, I would say he exposes this entire room of British boomers.